Welcome everyone to The Art of Advisory. This is Hector Garcia, and I'm here with my friend and co-host, Kirk Bowman. And our guest for today is Mario NOWOGRODZKI. And Mario, sorry if I butcher your name.
You're not the first or the last.
And Mario is actually based out of South Florida. We're actually pretty close together. And I'm actually extremely happy to have him on because he's one of the persons that I first saw teach QuickBooks and kind of technology integration with QuickBooks about 10 years ago. And when I saw Mario, I said, I want to be like that guy. But, you know, there's some traits about him that I don't want to be like him.
I don't, no blame. I was going to say, be like that guy. Okay, some things, but not everything.
But so Mario definitely inspired me to get into technology and QuickBooks consulting. So Mario, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Hector, and thank you, Kirk. Great to be part of this, and it's not a great, but an honor. Thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure. It's nice to meet you in person. Well, virtually, I guess.
Almost in person, right?
A little bit later.
Yes.
So Mario, let me start with, and I usually introduce the guests and kind of tell people what they do, but what you do is so unique that I would love for you to just give us a quick elevator pitch about what your area of focus is and what you're known for. Let's call it that.
Elevator pitch is actually one story of an elevator ride. For small and mid-sized businesses, small mid-sized organizations that need to improve the accuracy and efficiency of operations and finances. That is our focus. That is what we do. You look at what it is that they need. Of course, our focus is accounting software, but accounting is just the behind the scenes. It's really improving the accuracy and efficiency of operations in any business. We can get more granular as we go on, but that's the high-level elevator speech.
And what I would like to thank you, Mario. What I like to dig in deep into is that one of the areas of practice is kind of your nature specialty, which is also what led you. It was a natural progression, which is working with the mid-market client or maybe the high end of the small business or the low end of the mid-market. Is that that strange place where people need enterprise level software, but they can't afford $100,000 in implementation, right? So could you please just give us a general idea what that journey into mid-market has been like?
Good point. Our focus, maybe I'm going to say 10 or 12 years ago, I made a decision to focus on exactly the area that you mentioned. If you want to get specifics on demographics, companies of 10 to 250 employees, of course, we'll take companies that are a little smaller too. $1 million to $50 million in annual revenues. Again, that's just a kind of a range. We can go a little lower, sometimes go a lot higher. But it's those companies who are good, maybe in the area of using QuickBooks, but on the upper end, and they may need to push out. A lot of companies, and I can go explain a lot about this. A lot of companies are thinking that they have outgrown their small business management or accounting software, and they really haven't. They're just in that upper edge, because the next step up, just like you said, Hector, is the six-figure ERP system, and we try to fill in the gap between the upper end of the small business area and those that need to get to the six-figure.
Right, and wouldn't you say that it's relatively easy to consult on a customer that has $100,000 to spend on software, but it is even more challenging to try to make
exactly right. We are, and to jump on that point, we're just recently getting into the market again. Without getting into a lot of details, we do the majority, 90+% of our work is around QuickBooks software, QuickBooks centric. We're beginning to get into the Microsoft mid-market software. I think I told you about that, Hector, separately. And I've discovered something I already knew, basically, but anyone doing consulting on the larger end Microsoft, and there's a smaller version, SMB version of a Microsoft offering now. But anyway, the majority is that over $100,000, over six-figure software, and there's not a resistance on price generally from those type of customers. That's not our market today. Maybe it'll be one day, but it is not our market. So our market today is very similar to what you described. It's those businesses that it's actually more difficult. How do you serve people who need some type of mid-market or similar to mid-market solution, but don't have the budget to do it? So that makes it more challenging. And yeah, agree.
And when you think about, let's call it the purse, the budget purse the client has to get a new accounting system or to upgrade their existing system to something newer, when you think about their purse, and we move into software that it's now $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 more than what they expected. And that kind of cuts into the consulting fee of the purse, right? Because most people, when they have a budget, I think they have a dollar amount and they don't think too much about the consulting fees that go with, behind it, like implementation, training. Can you tell us about a little bit about the difficulties around that, and how do you determine what that client's total budget is, including the training and implementation, and how do you implement that in the way you present your work?
That's a great question. It's a great question that's going to necessitate maybe a long answer. I'll do my best at not making it long. There's several parts of the answer to this. To determine budget, to determine how much we need to spend, we meaning client and us, together, how much we need to spend. We need to perform, especially on a large implementation, especially have to perform a needs assessment, a due diligence needs assessment. That's step one. That will allow us to determine how small or how big the project will be in terms of money, budget-wise. Without that, it's very difficult to determine that from an initial phone call. You can probably get an indication, and in the same initial phone call, you can also discuss. I'm going to jump a little bit forward. You can also discuss with the client budget. Maybe I don't know from the initial phone call whether they're going to have to spend $2,000 or $5,000 or $50,000. Really, it can be that big of a range, including software consulting dollars and all that. But that's an important conversation that we bring up in the beginning. We do bring it up near the beginning or at the very beginning to determine if the customer has realized that what they're intending to do will cost them money. Okay, at least, especially when they're being open about where they want to be, where they want to go. So then we can discuss that. So budget is important. They may want everything. They might want the moon, but if there's no money to go to the moon, there's not much that anybody can do. There's not much that, I'd love to help them, but building a rocket and all around that takes a little bit of money. Not my decision. In fact, most of it is not even our money. It's software money. So that's really the gist of that. We start with a conversation about budget. I almost always have very recent examples. A client I just spoke with literally a few days ago, old client using QuickBooks Enterprise. You could say outgrowing, not really outgrowing, but just large transaction volume. All the needs are met by Enterprise. They have Enterprise. They use also for different division, QuickBooks Point of Sale, the whole gamut. But they're concerned because their wholesale division is growing by leaps and bounds, and the transaction volume will explode or will grow. So again, transaction is an issue with QuickBooks Enterprise, transaction size, volume. So they said, well, what else is out there? Well, we can consider different options, adding plugins, what have you. But I actually mentioned budget. I said before we could go much in this conversation, or before we set up a next call for next demo, then this may cost you some money. Software alone will be easily, $12, $15, maybe even $20,000. Software alone, plus consulting dollars. We even speak about consulting dollars. They tell me, well, no problem. The owner, I was speaking with the top person in charge, not the owner, but the owner wants to make the decision now. They're willing to spend the money to do it right, so they can have growth later on without impeding, without software being an impediment. Okay, so they're willing to put the money down. The same conversation could have gone the other way around. They go, oh, no, that's too much. That's over our budget. We really can't do it. Okay, can't do it. Let's see what else we can do within QuickBooks. Maybe we can do a file reduction, a file shrink, whatever, every couple of years, and keep you where you are. They don't want that. They want to spend money to go to the next level. So it's an important conversation to be had.
And let me ask you a question, Mark, if you don't mind. So absolutely I
Yes,
agree with you that the budget conversation has to be asked up front and all that stuff. But let me ask you some how questions, if you don't mind. And
of course,
I want to
of course.
extract maybe some of that secret sauce from what you do is, what are some tips and some techniques or preparing yourself on how to ask that question? Like I'm sure that I've asked, what's your budget many times, and I received an answer that it doesn't feel complete, or it feels safeguarded, or maybe they're worried about putting the cards on the table, or not giving them room for negotiation. What are some of the best learnings that you can tell us about how to go about asking that question in a way that you get a truthful answer?
Good point, because sometimes they're not forthcoming, or they don't even know themselves. They know they have a need. They may be shopping around. They have no idea. They don't know what it's going to cost. Sometimes I even get the question myself: how much is it going to cost me? I have no idea. Is it going to be little, much? Are we talking about hundreds or thousands? And that's a very, very honest question. That's maybe if we were in that position, also we wouldn't know. So we start by asking questions. What you just said. What kind of questions? Where do you want to be? First of all, in many situations, it's not the only thing we do, but in many of these larger mid-market enterprises, there's some type of inventory, something happening. It could be retail point of sale, could be manufacturing, could be wholesale distribution, or all of the above. So an important step, not so much required, but if possible, is to do a physical visit, okay, and observe and see what people, maybe observe them working, see what they're doing. Ask, why are you doing this? So, and actually ask a lot of everyone from top to bottom, from the receiving clerk to the AP, accounts payable person, to the controller. If it's manufacturing, watch each step of the way. Let's look at physically what a work order looks like for you guys, paperwork-wise, and ask every line item of every form. We ask, what is it for? Many times, I'm not surprised anymore by the answer of, I don't know why, but we just do it that way. Okay, and okay, that's fine. I'm not saying anything about it. Let me just absorb that, make notes, absorb, make notes. And then we can regurgitate back, okay, here's everything that I've seen you doing. I'm not understanding why, because you're doing something like this for 99 years doesn't mean you have to keep doing it this way. But many times that's a bit of an extreme case. That usually doesn't happen. Many times, because they're doing something for 99 years, the same way, they are seeking for better help. Maybe a younger generation, new management, new staff, and that's where we come in to maybe provide some automation to processes that were not there. So again, observation and asking why they're doing it. Even if it's just the AP clerk, why are you entering this here twice? Okay, I don't understand. Oh, because I don't have another way, because I need to know this, because I had, or because the owner makes me do. Okay, it is fine. Let me just make note, and we ask a lot of why. We ask tons of why, and we make notes of the whys. Not all the whys are always right. In fact, the majority of times they're not. But that's the gist of the needs assessment. And then also when we ask management, ownership, or together, where do you want to be? What is it that you want? Because with what you're doing now, with what your people are telling me now that you're doing, I don't see what you wanting to be done possible. And let me circle back to the budget conversation. Many times, I'm sure we all have stories where owners tell me, I want to do this and this and this, and they actually show me. And one client who wanted to implement an inventory barcoding solution, that's really all they needed. QuickBooks was plenty enough for what they were doing for inventory tracking. They just wanted barcoding. Why? So I started digging and digging and digging. They had many tons of bad shipments, incorrect shipments going out the door. So we started running some numbers. How much is this costing you per year? Okay, and again, we started adding numbers together. I helped the owner decide. It turned out to be about $40,000 a year that they were losing, bleeding out of their pockets in a company that was barely $1 million company. They were not a giant company. So, okay, great. If we implement your solution that's going to cost you less than $40,000, one-time cost, how about that? Doesn't it make sense? Well, it didn't make sense to the owner. Why? Because it meant writing a check for, I don't know, let's say, $25,000, something like that, or maybe 20. So they said, okay, well, I had to ask the blunt question, what is your budget? $5,000. okay, we can only do this much for $5,000. We can resolve a small portion of it. You still run the risk of having bad shipments. Probably the $40,000 is not going to make much of a dent. So unfortunately, again, budget comes into play here, but part of the needs assessment, like I just said, is also sometimes monetary. Let's assess, if possible, how much you are bleeding because of a malfunction in your system. And I don't mean system necessarily software. Software is part of it, of course, but in the people also. People are part of the system, or process, I should say. So I told you it would be a long answer.
Mario, I found it really intriguing that it sounds like you're serving two groups of customers. They're both at kind of this transition point from maybe being a small business to a medium or large business. Mm-hmm. You've got some who are ready to make that leap. Mm-hmm. Budget is not so much the primary concern. They're really more concerned about the growth. They're kind of forward looking. Then you've got a second group who maybe they need your assistance either to continue in the way they are for now, or maybe they don't realize that growth is what they need. I'd love to hear some more as you kind of contrast those two groups, because at least from my perspective, I'd be like, I really would enjoy working with the first group. I get the impression you enjoy working with the latter group as well.
No. Don't get me wrong. We love working with that first group. That first group is our favorite, most perfect client, if I could use some bad English here. Okay, they are by far the best. We internally, me and my staff, we always say to each other, why can't we get more clients like this, where they don't challenge your invoices? That's one thing. They don't question, you have to buy X, Y, Z software for this much, and it'll be this much consulting time. They say, okay, fine. When can you start? They care more about speed of when can we start and finish than about the money. And that's another concern too, but that's not such a bad concern. So maybe you hear me speak more passionate about the second group only because they're more difficult. Okay, not our favorite. Our favorite are the ones that are open, like you described it very well, Kurt. Open to growth. The growth is primary in their mind. They know it's going to cost them money, and they're willing to spend that money because they know it represents growth. And the companies maybe even exactly like you said, in the same position, except that ownership in the second group, hasn't made that decision to become a big business. They haven't. And that makes it difficult. We can only work so much with them because they only have so much of a budget. And we can provide them partial solutions, sometimes no solutions, so we don't work with them. So, yeah.
Do you find occasionally someone in that second group that you can help provide the clarity so that they see that the growth is possible, and so they actually, because of your help, move into the first group?
Yes, not very often, unfortunately, because now we're digging into human nature. No more business. It's human nature and mental nature. And if someone has decided that they are a small business, they're a small business. They're not going to grow beyond that. And it's a matter of decision and attitude. So, again, I'm not a psychologist, even though I play one to our clients sometimes. We have had success, but unfortunately, human nature is stronger than any proof we can show that, hey, you gotta spend to grow. You wanna grow? Yes, but. Well, I can't hear a but if you wanna grow. You wanna grow, period. Okay? If there's a but, meaning money, okay, I respect that. I'm not gonna fight you that. Maybe I was there one day too. I don't know. Maybe I would have been there. So that's that's what it is. That's we're in what we are. In business and operations, we're a consulting firm for operations and financial software. The reality is that all these businesses are run by people. People are humans, and can't fight against that.
Mario, if you allow me to jump in, what do you think is more important? Forcing someone to transform for the better, let's call it that. And Mario, assuming that you did a great scope and you know what that better looks like, even if they don't, right? Because that happens sometimes. Yeah. Or is it to adapt to specifically what they're looking for and not to exceed or transform that expectation? I mean, I know it's a strange question, but where you find yourself to be a better advisor, let's call it that?
Yeah, it's not a strange question, and actually it's a very good question. I'm glad we got to that question, because one thing is to address what the client's asking for. Another thing is to provide them the best solution for them. And sometimes those are two very distinct things. Okay. Case in point, I may have told you this story one day, Hector, long ago, story that we use time and time again in our own company. We had a client who came to us, client in the Midwest, near St. Louis it was, came to us because they wanted to implement a barcoding solution. They came saying, we want to implement barcoding. Okay, let's take you from where you are now to, by the way, barcoding with QuickBooks, because someone recommended them that. Okay, let's take you from that to the so-called barcoding with QuickBooks. Needs assessment, we scope what it had to do and so on. So inside of the work that had to be done was a conversion from an old, aging, 20-plus-year-old SBT system to QuickBooks. So then we could then consider implementing inventory correctly, barcoding, an inventory barcoding add-on, et cetera, et cetera. The owner, all that she wanted was that last piece, be able to grab with her right hand a barcode scanner, left hand an item, and scan it, without minding whatsoever about the behind-the-scenes accounting or that old aging SBT, which she knows was bad. So the accounting in the old system was horrendously wrong. The GL was wrong. It took us 90% more effort to make that conversion of accounting systems from A to B, from SBT to QuickBooks, than to implement the actual barcoding system. It actually took us longer than expected. It was a mess. We had to get with their accountant, professional, and so on. So the point here is that what they needed wasn't just a barcoding solution. They needed a conversion, implementing a new system, clean up their accounting, and then a barcoding. They didn't want to hear about that. So to them, we implemented a barcoding solution. To us, we actually implemented an entire ERP, plus happens to be barcoding for convenience, for automation. So the two things didn't, I don't remember right now, but I don't know what they got billed for. I'm sure that if we invoiced for implementing an ERP, they would have pushed back and saying, I didn't want to buy that, just wanted a barcode system. Okay, so maybe we could have invoiced the barcoding system, I don't know, at $50,000 when it really was 1,000. I'm exaggerating, of course. But that's really what the client wanted was one thing. What they really needed was something else. And we have that time and time again. So the lesson here is to do what the client is expecting, do what the client is asking for, but really delivering what they need and marrying those two concepts. It's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy, but that's what we do.
That's right. Let me follow up with that. I love that, Mario. That was an awesome way to explain that. So if I understand this correctly, the client has this sort of oversimplistic solution that they want, and the barcode, I run into that all the time. People say, I want barcodes, right?
Without knowing what they're asking for. I just want a barcode. Yeah.
Right. I mean, just the satisfaction of grabbing a box and getting that red light and that beep. That's it. That's what they're buying, right?
I know.
So what you're saying, if I understand, is if that's what they want and you detected that to be, that is, what they want, the means to the end is something that you don't necessarily have to break down and scope out or justify saying, I can't get you there until I do this.
We have to scope it so we can do it. We may not be explaining it too explicitly to the client because they don't really care. Let's be blunt. They don't care, and they just think that we're wasting their time. Why are you talking to me about converting accounting systems when I asked for was a barcode system?
And that's a little bit counterintuitive, I think. And Mario, I think that's because you're an IT person. I would say, we're both CPAs and we're both CITP or whatever that is. But I think in our hearts, both of us, we are IT people that, we wear the accountant mask just so we can, solve real world business solutions. But I think because you're an IT person, then you do that sort of counterintuitive thing that most accountants don't do. Accountants have to, I think, and it's kind of a formal explanation, we have to explain things sequentially. We have to say, we go from here to here, then from here to here, then from here to here, and then we get here. And what I'm hearing from you is that a lot of clients are not going to like that as much as maybe you detecting what that vision of scanning that
Right.
barcode without knowing why, and honing on that. Is that what you're saying?
That's very accurate. Yes, you know, we are, as I'm sure you are, we that are successful in this kind of software consulting. We are, to use a cliche, we're results driven. Because why? The client's results driven. Not I'm choosing it that way. The client is results driven. The client wants what they're asking for to be delivered in exactly the shape that they're asking for, and it's up to us to interpret and understand what it is that they're asking for, and then to build whatever is behind the scenes to give them what they're asking for. We have to explain what it is. Hey, we have to build you an accounting system behind the scenes. Yes, we have to explain, but we don't have to over-explain. And the scoping out is just for us to actually deliver it correctly. But the deliverable, the actual chargeable deliverable, has to be what they're asking for. You know, we even use their own wording many times. I'm sure you do too, Hector. You know, when the client's asking for XYZ, even though really what they need is ABC, that really means XYZ, we have to use their language and say, yeah, you know, we just delivered you an XYZ, and so you can do, you know, blah blah whatever. But it's important to even use their language, and we capture that from the very beginning. We make lots and lots of notes on what language they're using to define certain components of what they're going to be using or what they need.
That's a great technique. If I would love to reiterate on that, Mario. So if they call something else that's not the wording that you're used to, but you do pick up on that, you know, like they'll call an item the cost code, or they'll call a class the section, right?
There's probably 1,000 different terms for items. Items is a good one. Okay, you know, parts, items, codes, SKUs is a popular one. You know, fine. We can. So QuickBooks calls it an item. Great. So what? Let's call it what the client is calling it. And like that, there's, you know, clients the same way, clients, customers. You know, the user term. You might think it's not important, but terminology is super important. Super important. It's not just a technicality. It's very, very important. And also that comes from, I'm sure it comes for you as well. It comes from also knowing another language. You know, in Spanish, there's even more wording for the same thing. So I speak Spanish, you speak Spanish. I've had to do consulting jobs in Spanish where I don't even know the name of the terms in accounting, and I learn from the client, and it's completely surprising to me. You know, you'd be surprised how many names there exist for something called a chart of accounts in an accounting system in Spanish. There's many more than there are in English. And it's important to use those terms with whoever you're speaking from, whatever country they're from. So that has also expanded, I think, our repertoire, as they say.
Mario, you have described several things that really all fall under the umbrella of an effective consultant. The idea that, number one, you want to perceive, how does the customer see the value? So going back to your example, the owner was asking for a barcode. You knew that in that situation, it required all of this back end work, but what they wanted was a barcode. So in that situation, you got two things. One, to understand why they want the barcode, but then two, to intuitively, through asking good questions, perceive, do I need to educate them on the rest of this? And I would say in some situations you do, and some you do not. What's your experience about, you know, the difference between two different customers who both want barcodes, but one you're willing to educate, they want to know, and the other who doesn't?
Let's just say the deliverable might be the same, of course, is what they're asking for. One wants to understand what's going on and is receptive. And I'm going to go back to something I said to you, Kirk, a little while ago. It's human nature. Okay, some people are open to new concepts, and some people are not. This is not even a matter of budget, of going to from small to big business. No. You know, assuming that they're willing to pay for it, let's go with what budget is first, right? Willing to pay for whatever it costs. We can even ask. Sometimes we find ourselves asking the very, very blunt question, do you want to know the details? We ask. It's honest. Okay? And if we get, sure, I want to know, and they show interest, okay, then we get deep into it, and that's fantastic. We love that because we love to share, right? We love to share the process. If we get any type of pushback on, well, you know, you can tell me about that later or when you finished. Okay, guess what? I'm not going to tell you when I finish. You know, we'll give you the deliverable. You'll be happy. Trust me. Don't have to worry about under the hood. Okay? And under the hood is a great analogy. How many people drive a car myself included to an extent, without needing to care what's under the hood, right? And some people want to know every bit of piece that makes that four-wheel vehicle move. Some people use different number of wheels.
What you're describing is you have to exercise judgment. You have to exercise judgment to discern, is this customer just interested in barcoding, or do they want and even need that education behind it? And you're going to answer that question two different ways. It's the human nature that you're describing.
Yes, judgment, common sense, those two usually go together, one hopes. Is something that it's probably the number one characteristic when we are hiring for consultants. And it's hard. You can't put that in a resume. Hey, have good judgment and good common sense. It's very hard to detect that even. But judgment and common sense, because in consulting, that's what you got to do. And you have to shoot from the hip many times and absorb that reaction from the customer and recognize that. And that's judgment. You hit it right on the nail. I like the word judgment better than common sense, even though sometimes they're interchanged, sometimes rightly, sometimes not rightly. But judgment is a very key component of a good consultant. Has to be.
I find it interesting that you are actually looking for that skill when you're hiring. What are you looking for when you're talking to a possible candidate that lets you know this person has some judgment that we can help develop?
Well, it's hard to judge judgment, like that play on words, right? It's hard. It's hard. I mean, it's nothing new. I'm not saying anything everybody doesn't know. We have to ask by asking questions. I'm going to say situation questions. What would you do in this situation? Here's an example of something hypothetical or something I asked. What was the hardest client situation you ever had? What was the best one, and what was the worst one? And what did you do about it? Okay, it's asking situational questions. Examples, sample questions, as I call them. I always hope to learn that from somebody better than I. Always open to suggestions on interview questions. It's difficult. It's not an easy thing.
And Mario, would you suggest as a best practice to, when you walk out of maybe a difficult client or a strange situation or a new situation, to document it and put it into your, as you say, your book of great questions to ask candidates?
I don't have a book, but it's a great idea. Maybe I'll start it this afternoon. We do document. We don't document we do not do a good enough job of documenting what I keep referring to before as human nature, the human part of the equation. Hey, difficult client, easy to deal with. We love this person. No, but we do document who is most receptive. Deal with this person when you go there. Deal with this. We always identify the proponent, which usually is the majority of people in a business, and the detractor. That's clearly identified whenever we do a large implementation. If we're lucky, there's no detractor, and that's fantastic. It's a 100% success rate if there's no detractor. But that's what we document. We don't document more specific than that. But it's a great idea.
And Mario, I know that you lead your company. I know you have other consultants that are partners, and they're sort of
as I put them, that they're better than I.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Do you find when you hire, because when we talk about hiring, there are different levels of support people in your team. I mean, there's going to be the folks that are out there. Let's call them the field folks that are holding the client's hands and are making decisions on the fly. Major decisions that changes the scope and changes the direction of the project. And there are folks that are waiting for you to give them a task, and they're just really good at doing that task. Do you find that level of judgment, as Kirk said, to be as important throughout your entire team? In other words, is it okay to hire folks that are going to be excellent advisors, although they're not being hired to do so?
They are. I think I understand what you're asking. I would prefer to hire folks that are going to be excellent advisors, in other words, that are going to exercise good judgment, correct judgment, best judgment, even though in the very beginning, especially if they're just starting in the consulting career, I may not put them out on the field, customer facing, to exercise that judgment and just do the repetitive technical work that has to be done behind the scenes. That's the beginning of consultant's life. But those people, I want to hire those that have the judgment, so that when they graduate, and it's a gradual graduation, it's not overnight, graduate to customer facing. And yes, customer facing means you're making decisions, and they better be the right ones. Some things can be corrected if they're not, but they better be the right ones. So they have to come with the right skills at judgment already. I find it I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's very difficult to teach judgment. I'd love to have a class on teaching judgment. It's difficult. So long answer to your short question, hire with the intention of having those skills when you go out on the field. Technical skills can be learned, judgment not so easily.
And Mario, let me ask you kind of the question I was going to get to, because and for the audience that may not know who Mario is, I'm sure everybody does, but Mario is sort of a living legend in the world of QuickBooks consulting, mostly on the inventory world. And I know, and I've met many folks that started their own businesses doing QuickBooks consulting, and they worked for you at some point, right? So so can you tell us about the risk of hiring someone that's a superstar, potential superstar, and they're feeding off learning from you and then going off and starting? I know this we weren't prepared for a question like this, but I just thought of it at the moment. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, the thought is that it's a risk, but with that risk, there's no gain. So if I'm going to hire, you being the best consultant prospect there is, and then you learn the best that you can from me or from our firm. Yes, legally speaking, there's contractual non-compete and all that stuff, but all that has an expiration always. Yes, and it's a risk. It's happened. Some of the folks that have worked for me, and on the most part, we've all parted amicably. That's actually a plus. And we've still, after they've left us, we have collaborated on some work as well. That's the point of leaving amicably. So it's a risk. The long answer is that it's a risk. The risk that I thought about look, for a while, I'm going to say for a big part of my firm's history, which is now 25 years, going on 26, next year will be 26. For a big part, I don't know, 5 years, give or take, maybe more, I was hesitant on that risk. I was just myself alone, doing just a one-man shop, and thinking that I didn't want to take that. I didn't believe in that risk until gradually, or one day I just woke up and said, okay, I'm taking the risk. I can't, if I want to grow, I'm not going to grow alone. So I'm going to take the risk, take somebody under my wing, or more than one, and take it. And I've gained people, I've lost people. I have a couple that are still with me for very many years. It's a risk. It's a calculated risk that I was willing to take, and I continue willing to take. And one more thing, the people that have grown with us, on the most part, have stayed with us, because they see the benefit of together we can be much stronger than independent. It's a fact. Again, the smartest individuals realize that, and they're still in our firm, I like to think.
And are you openly hiring consultants, accountants, the QuickBooks advisors?
The answer is yes. You know why? The answer is always yes, sometimes more than others. We are hiring currently today, yes, because when is the best time to hire somebody? When you do not need them. Okay?
Interesting.
Because then you're open, then there's no rush. I don't have to just take the first person that walks on the street. I can be much more selective and hire the best talent. So right now, I don't know how long it's been that I have not hired somebody, because probably I haven't found the right person. But and I don't officially need somebody today per se, but if I were to come across in my search and I find the right person, I'm taking them. That's how we've grown. I take every opportunity I can get.
Awesome, Mario. Thank you for saying that, and we'll put on the show notes Mario's contact information. MendelssohnConsulting.com, correct, Mario?
Correct.
Okay, yeah, so you can reach out to Mario there. I want to change gears a little bit, if you don't mind, and let's talk about something a little bit more fun.
Wait, this is not fun? What do you mean?
Well, you'll see what I'm getting. You'll get what I'm saying. So It turns out that you do a lot of work in the Caribbean. A lot of work in the Caribbean, or you've done a lot of work in the
I've
Caribbean.
done a lot, sometimes more than others.
Yeah.
Right now at present, not right now at present, but yeah, I've done in the past.
But you do have consultants and partners in Curacao and islands.
Yeah.
Can you tell me something interesting, insightful or fun about what is it like to do business in the Caribbean at Caribbean speeds?
That alone is one of the most fun parts at Caribbean speeds. Trying to implement our, I don't want to call it our work ethic, because they're really hard workers there as well, but our work schedule. How about that? Trying to implement our work schedule. Hey, I'll be there at 8 a.m., start fresh early. Not easy, and you have to adapt, and it's fun. That's a fun part of it. It doesn't mean, I don't mean that they start at 12, no, but it's not 8:30, 9, somebody doesn't show up until 10, okay, nobody gets upset. That's the most fun part, is that rarely will anybody get upset about anything, okay, much less about schedule. Many years ago, super many years ago, one of my first jobs, I think it was in the Bahamas. It was before we even have an on-site, on-the-ground partner down there. I went out to do a job. The client, this is a funny story, the client was the actual hotel. The hotel hired us for implementing a POS system at the hotel, basically. So I'm staying at the hotel, of course. And it was back in the days of, I don't remember why I didn't have a cell phone with me. It doesn't matter, whatever. But I didn't have my own alarm clock. So I said, okay, just, the hotel, you asked for a wake-up call, something that young people probably don't know what it is, but there used to be wake-up calls at hotels. And I don't know, let's say wake-up call, I don't know, 7 o'clock, whatever. All of a sudden, I wake up and it's, I think, 8:20, and nobody called me, okay? And I get up, wash up, go down, and say, hey, the same person that I'm working with to implement the point of sale system at the front desk, I asked, why no wake-up call? It's okay, we forgot, no worries. Okay. But I'm the guy who's going to work for you. It doesn't matter. You can whenever you can. Okay. Okay, fine. I did my job. I did not do it. I just did it at a later point. So I finished later in the day than I expected. And it's a small, silly example, silly story, but that's a good example. One other thing that comes with working in the Caribbean, which is so close to us. We're in South Florida area, Miami, Fort Lauderdale area. It is really so close. We're the closest ones. We're literally no more than 3 hours away from the farthest Caribbean island anywhere, usually less, is such a vast difference. And let's say the closest one being Bahamas, which is less than 20 minutes, 30 minutes from us. Such a diverse, such a different culture and work schedule. And I like to say a much more, not friendly, but much more lighter attitude on everything, including work, especially work, because we go there for work, obviously. Okay. Most people go there for fun, vacation, and everything else. Not we. We have plenty of great sun and beaches where we live, so that's not where we go down to the Caribbean. And it's the attitude. I like to say, in the example of the island of Curacao in the Netherlands Antilles, since the first time I went to the many more times I've gone there, what impressed me the most are the people, how happy they are. Just happy, plain happy. From the street sweeper cleaner to the highest executive position. They're just same as happy. And by the way, they all have the full command of 4 different languages, including English. So that was very impressive to me, how the happiness and the good nature of people on the most part. So that's just a fun part. You're right, that was going to be a fun question, and it is. It has nothing to do with work. It just makes work that much more pleasant. Sometimes more difficult, because many times you can't really get into work gear mode, but it is a lot pleasant. Yeah.
And Mario, do you find that people in the islands, and obviously I don't want to generalize, because you said Aruba could be different than Dominican Republic, could be different than Puerto Rico. Yeah. Do you find those folks to value consulting and advisory as much as the U.S. folks, or do they have a different way of seeing it?
It varies. It depends. And again, depends on the size of business. Just like here, over there's different sizes of business. The smallest of businesses do not see the value in consulting. Do not. They don't, you're going to charge me for this? How much it's going to be? No, they don't see value. The larger businesses, just like here, they do. They do understand that they need consulting help and advisory help. and they're willing to take it. So that's just a business size decision. We get that a lot here. The smallest of businesses do not see the value. And if I can take it on a tangent, sometimes one of my people in my company, they tell me, look, let's go after this business. They have this budget. They have a lot of money they can spend on consulting. And I said, there's a difference between having money in the bank and seeing the value of consulting. Okay, somebody may be able to afford you, but not agree with the value you're representing. I agree. It's just a matter of values. Their values. They don't agree with having to go out and get help. They're willing to do it themselves or not do anything. So again, that was a bit of a side, side comment on the value, on what people would value on.
It's a perfect segue because I have a feeling that Kirk wants to ask you a question about value and pricing.
Value, Kirk. You know the word value? You're gonna ask me about value?
I actually learned how to spell it a couple of weeks ago, so I'm pretty excited about that.
Just in time for that conference.
There you go. Mario, there's a theme running through a lot of your comments, getting back to this idea of using judgment and the customer's perception of value. So I want to turn to another area where you have to use your judgment is after you've done your due diligence for needs analysis discovery, you then are in a position to say, okay, we've now learned about your situation. Now we're going to make some recommendations. Now we're going to say, here's how we could help you. Here's how we can guide you toward the value and the results that you're seeking. Do you use options when you do that? Do you actually give the customer a range of choices so that not only can you maybe have one or two that fit what they say their budget is, but maybe at least one that stretches their budget that actually offers them more than they knew they could have?
And the answer to that, as I'm going to give you the best consultant answer is it depends. Okay, it depends. The answer is sometimes yes. I would say the majority of the time, no. They're coming to us for a single recommendation. So we give them the best recommendation possible within, again, budget and everything. There might be an unofficial second or maybe even third option. Yes, there might be that we discuss, depending on the reaction. But the majority of the time, if they're hiring us for the needs assessment and for the eventual recommendation, we will give them a single, maybe it's a single recommendation with different pieces and different modules, and you can do this for this much, you can do this for this less, it could be, and they may have to make some choices. But again, depending on if there's pushback on that, then we say, okay, let's look at alternative. There are other options, especially if the client says, is this the only thing I can do? Are there options? But generally, we need to make the choice for them in terms of options. And if we give a client too many options, they might be likely to choose the wrong one, not the one that we intended to recommend. So we have to, again, drive them to that recommendation. Okay, drive them to the recommendation in any way possible, via price, via delivery date, via any kind of way.
Well, and I think you made a very good distinction between the recommendation being this is what you need in order for your business to go in the direction that, number one, you say you want it to go, but number two, the direction that we see it can go.
Yeah, correct.
But then there's different degrees that they can implement for that. And so
Sure.
When I use the word option, I'm really talking about degrees. And so you referred to that. It could be implementing one module versus two, or two modules versus three. Or it might be the delivery deadline. There's different ways
what we call it phases.
Get the recommendation within budget and time frame and other variables.
An example of options or degrees could be phases. Okay, we can do all this much for you, but if you want, we do it in phases. So here's let's call it option 1, option 2, option 3. We'll do all of them just in phases. The typical crawl before you walk, before you run. So that's how we can break down projects. And really, it's an option. They can choose not to do phase 3. It's okay. They can still have an operating system. They just won't have, barcoding at the end of the day. They might have everything they need without the one last piece. It's not an incomplete system. It's just not as full featured. Okay.
That's interesting. I love that take, Mario, where you're saying, no, I'm not giving people three options because what they're paying for is they want that one recommendation of what they say in Spanish, the 3 Bs, bueno, bonito y barato, which means good, pretty, and cheap, right? So they're looking for that perfect convergence of budget, feasibility, functionality. What's my best choice? I think that's people are coming to you for. That was my best choice.
Yeah, that's right. And remember, whenever we get any type of discussion or argument or pushback, we have to say, hey, you are paying us for our recommendation. That is what you came to us asking. You came to us asking for a recommendation. We're giving you that. You want more? I'm happy to give you more. But you asked us for our expertise, and our expertise says you should do this, A. Well, we don't want to spend for A. How about B? Okay. As long as B was one of my other options, it's okay. But if it's not something that we recommend, then, worst case scenario, we walk away. Worst case, obviously. But if B is another one of the options, or a partial A, you could say, then fine, we can do that. They can choose. They're not locked into exactly what we say.
I do love, Mario, that you have one end in sight. That perfect scenario where they as you said, they grab the box, they scan it, and behind the scenes, something meaningful is happening. However, you break it down in phases and progress, that if the client picks one, let's say there's 4, 1, 2, 3, whichever, you still transform something. Maybe you didn't get the whole there, but you do it in such a way that the client has a choice to do the whole thing or some of it, and that helps maybe them mitigate the risk a little bit.
Yeah, good point. I mean, a good example was that client that was losing $40,000 a year in bad shipments, and they only wanted to spend. Actually, they only did spend $5,000 on a barcode solution, which had no inventory functionality, just barcoding. Okay, and that was fine. That worked. They were happy with that one crawl, walk, run thing. They were happy with just the crawling, and they stayed that way. That's their attitude. That's how the business is growing or not growing, because that's how much they wanted to go. But again, it was an option. I could have chosen to say that's not an option. That's not good for you. You're going to go under. No, but no, it was an option. It's feasible. They're still in business. They didn't lose. They just not exploded as a business as they could have had they gone with our full-blown option, we believe. But that's up to them.
Wow, Mario, thank you very much. This hour just flew by. Let me ask you the last 2 questions, the wrap-up questions. First question is, what is the best business advice that you have ever received?
That I have ever received? I don't know. Several things I've received. One of the things that I always keep in the back of my mind is never rest on your laurels. Awards, distinctions, even customer wins are great. Keep them there. Keep going forward. Don't keep looking back at those. Those do not earn me money. Okay, they're nice for marketing. I'm not gonna say no. Yes, honors and awards, but don't rest on those. Actually, my dad told me that since the very beginning, and he tells me that almost all the time. Congratulations, you're doing great, but don't rest on your laurels. Keep going. That's not the end goal. Another thing that I read, not something that gave me, but I read, which makes a lot of sense in consulting, is we have, what's the phrase say? It's a Greek philosopher who said it. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, which means listen more, at least twice as much as you speak. Now, to some, those that know me, you know me well, Hector, that's kind of difficult to believe out of me, right? Because I do speak. But I do, actually, I do listen twice as much, even though I speak a lot. Imagine how much I listen. So I listen a lot, especially in consulting. Ask maybe 1 question, why, and listen for 1,000 words instead of just 1. So ask little and listen more. And listen and observe. Listen, not just listen with your ears. Listen by looking, by watching. Somebody cross your eye, be observant. And then you're going to capture a lot more than you can by speaking. Okay. So
in accounting terms, that's listening 67.767% and talking 33.33%.
If you want to quantify it, yes, I am good with that. Yes.
Yeah, sorry, it's the accountant in me had to calculate. I'm actually doing some numbers here. Okay, and the last question, Mario, is tell me a story, a customer story, a transformation story in which you gave someone key advice and they listened and something amazing happened that you want to share with us.
So luckily we've had a few. We've had several. I like to think there's maybe a couple that stand out. Many I say super many years ago. That means about 10 years. Many years ago, clients using this is not even an implementing new system. This is just taking the system they have and reinventing it. Pretty big company, large establishment using 2 separate QuickBooks databases on 2 different year versions because they need to separate. I can't remember the details, but they were using 2 different ones on, I want to say QuickBooks 06 and 07, 2 versions and so on. It was back in the days when you could not run 2 versions of the same, 2 company files at the same time, so they kept 2 different versions. And it was extremely inefficient. You can only imagine a lot of repetitive work entering from A to B, B to A. And this is a large establishment. They didn't see why somebody set them up on that, let's just say wrongly, or maybe it was a temporary fix. So I started observing, and they called us for some other technical help, and I started observing without them asking. This is the important part in consulting. Sometimes you have to offer advice that the people are not asking for. So I say, using 2 QuickBooks files, why? And then I get the barrage of different answers, none of which are valid, of course. Finally, through many months, maybe even years of us proposing, hey, let's consolidate, make it one. They finally saw the value of it because I showed them. I gave them an example. I actually created a dummy file with their sample data and say, here's how person A can do the work and B can see and C and D and so on. And there's many people who touch the same data until they said, okay, fine, how much? And the how much, even though it was probably the largest data conversion we had ever done in time, in money, and everything, they didn't blink. They didn't blink. They said, okay, fine, when can you do it? Okay, I was expecting a different question, not when, but why so much, but they didn't ask why so much. This is one of these larger, not small anymore, mid-market type of businesses. So we were very successful. Afterwards, it was the sense of work ease was palpable. It was no more frustration by, I have to do my work again in QuickBooks. Now it was palpable. And that was a great win because we saw the result. And it was just purely technical work. It wasn't even accounting. There was no inventory. There was nothing, just purely technical work that we did for them. Of course, we had to have understanding, knowledge of accounting behind the scenes, make sure debits equal the credits between all the companies and all that, obviously, and make sure that the financials match and et cetera. But the sense of success when it's not expressed, when it's just palpable, the moment you walk into an office, that is the satisfaction.
Mario, I've really enjoyed visiting with you. I think I speak for Hector as well, that we really appreciate you coming on the show. If one of our audience would like to reach out and connect with you, how can they do that?
Easy, just my first name, Mario, at mendelsonconsulting.com, all spelled out, MENDELSON, consulting.com. That is best way to get me, email. There's a phone number also that I have, but email will get me faster than phone.
Well, Mario, thanks for being on the show.
Well, thanks for having me. Kurt, Hector, great opportunity. Thanks for the pleasure. It was an honor. Thank you.
Honor's ours. Thank you, Mario.